The company holiday party was fading to embers when he first truly noticed her. Vanessa Moore, the CEO, was propped against the bar, the sequins on her dress fracturing the dim light. Her eyes had a glassy sheen, and her laughter, aimed at nothing, was a note too high. Colleagues began to dissolve into the night, their gazes carefully averted. He was nearly out the door himself when her eyes locked onto his. "You're from facilities, aren't you?" David Johnson had been standing before the small bedroom mirror, the one with a hairline fracture spidering across a corner, adjusting the collar of his one good shirt. It had been resting in his closet for ages, carrying the faint scent of the cedar block he'd tucked away years ago. He wasn't entirely sure why he was going. Corporate parties weren't his scene, particularly at a company where he spent most of his time being invisible. From the other room, Amara's voice sailed in. "Dad, you're not wearing that, are you?" Her tone was a perfect blend of 9-year-old authority and playful mischief. She materialized in his doorway, holding a hairbrush like a scepter, her favorite purple pajamas adorned with tiny penguins. "This is the best it gets," David answered, his face a mask of neutrality. "I'll make an appearance for an hour, maybe less. Grab a few of those fancy appetizers and head home." Amara folded her arms, her expression serious as she scrutinized him. "You never do anything just for fun," she declared, shaking her head with the disappointment of a lifelong friend. "And don't try to tell me unclogging the sink last Saturday was fun." A small smile touched David's lips, but her words held a familiar sting. Fun had been traded long ago for overtime shifts, thrift store clothes, and the steady assurance of rent for their small apartment. "It's not my world, baby girl," he said gently. "They're all engineers and executives. I'm the guy who mops their floors." She stepped forward, her small hands carefully smoothing his collar. "That's even more reason to go. You don't know who you might meet." Her gaze shifted to his dresser, and she pulled open the top drawer, retrieving his only tie, a deep navy silk with subtle silver dots. She held it up to him like a peace offering. He let out a soft sigh and took it from her. "What's this all about? You trying to marry me off to someone in marketing?" She giggled. "No, but you might meet somebody important, or just someone who makes you smile for real." Her voice grew softer. "You deserve that, Dad." The sincerity in her voice landed with unexpected weight. She was just a kid, but she saw his loneliness with a clarity he hadn't realized was so transparent. He looked at her determined face, the stubborn set of her chin, and he knew she was right. "1 hour," he conceded, looping the tie around his neck. "That's it." Amara beamed, her mission accomplished. "And if they have those little coconut shrimp, bring me some." David's laughter was a welcome release, loosening the tightness in his chest. "It's a deal." He grabbed his coat from a hook, gently touched one of her braids, and stepped out into the crisp December air, wondering if this brief, reluctant outing might be more significant than he imagined. The rooftop terrace was aglow with strings of tiny white lights that shimmered against the glass partitions. The cold air bit at David's cheeks, but heaters stationed around the perimeter provided a gentle warmth. A smooth R&B track flowed from hidden speakers, creating a relaxed conversational vibe. He lingered near the entrance, hands shoved in his pockets, absorbing the atmosphere. Men in tailored suits laughed over glasses of dark liquor, while women in elegant dresses clustered together, sharing stories in low, conspiratorial tones. He made his way to the buffet, a deliberate slowness in his steps, trying to appear as if he belonged. He put a few crackers and some cheese on a small plate, something to occupy his hands. As he sipped a cup of soda, he watched the social currents of the party from his safe harbor. The tech guys were in one corner, the sales team in another, each group speaking its own distinct language. David felt like a tourist, offering a polite nod when someone's eyes met his before they inevitably drifted away. He thought of Amara, likely curled up on their sofa watching a movie, and could almost hear her chiding him for hiding in the corner. But this was easier, safer. There was no risk of saying the wrong thing and reminding everyone that he was just the janitor. That's when he noticed the disturbance near the bar. It started as a ripple of whispers, then became a wave of sideways glances. At its center was Vanessa Moore. Her usual commanding presence was replaced by a loose, precarious sway. The sequins on her dress flashed as she let out another laugh that was too loud and lasted too long. She waved away a junior executive who tried to offer a steadying hand. Her words were slurring, her drink sloshing in her glass. David had only ever seen her in the hallways, a figure of crisp suits and decisive movements, her greetings brief and professional. The woman at the bar was someone else entirely, disordered, vulnerable, and profoundly alone. Phones began to appear, their screens glowing as discreet text messages were sent. He overheard snippets of conversation. "Just leave her be. Don't get involved." The crowd around her began to evaporate, each person slipping back into the larger party. David stood still for a moment, his mind racing. She wasn't his problem. He could leave as planned and be home in less than an hour. But the image of her standing there, abandoned while everyone pretended not to see, struck a dissonant chord within him. He set down his plate, grabbed his coat, and started moving toward her. By the time David got to the bar, Vanessa's last few fair-weather companions had vanished. She was alone, leaning heavily on the counter, clutching her half-full glass. "Don't need a taxi," she mumbled to the empty space beside her. "Got my own people." Her voice, normally so precise in company-wide emails, was now soft and slurred. The bartender shot David a look, a silent question in his raised eyebrow. David hesitated. He and the CEO weren't acquaintances. A quick nod in the corridor was the extent of their interaction. But right now, she didn't look like the formidable executive who ran a multi-million-dollar company. She just looked lost. "Miss Moore," he said, his voice gentle as he stepped closer. She squinted, her eyes struggling to focus on him. "You're David from facilities?" she asked, her words carefully formed. "Yes, ma'am." A slow, wry smile spread across her face. "You're kinder than my own driver," she murmured, as if that explained everything. She swayed again, and David made his decision. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you home." He draped her coat over her shoulders and guided her toward the exit. She didn't resist, though she did pause once to give a grand, theatrical wave to a bewildered group on the dance floor. The cold night air seemed to sober her slightly. David led her to his old but reliable sedan. She managed to buckle her seatbelt before slumping against the passenger window. The city lights streaked past as he drove, the quiet hum of the engine a soothing presence in the car. When they arrived at the entrance to her gated community, she stirred. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice quieter now, the bravado gone. David didn't have to think about the answer. "Because if it were me," he said, looking at her in the dim glow of the dashboard, "I'd hope someone would do the same." Her gaze met his for a moment, softer and more unguarded than he'd ever seen. She looked away, fumbling in her purse for her keys. He waited until the front door clicked shut behind her before he drove away, the question of whether she'd remember any of it hanging in the air. The next morning, David was back in the building long before sunrise. The lobby air was sharp with the scent of disinfectant, and the only sound was the rhythmic swoosh of his mop against the polished marble. His movements were automatic, a routine honed over years, but his mind kept replaying the previous night. He told himself she wouldn't recall the details. People in her position had ways of erasing inconvenient moments. He held no illusions about his place in the corporate hierarchy. Anyone else might have seen an opportunity, a moment of leverage. The thought hadn't even crossed his mind, but in the harsh light of morning, a seed of doubt began to sprout. Sometimes, doing the right thing could still lead to trouble. The soft chime of an elevator broke the silence. He glanced up and his stomach tightened. Vanessa Moore stepped out, immaculate in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled. She held a coffee cup in one hand, and there was no trace of last night's disarray. She was the CEO again, composed, powerful, impenetrable. Her eyes found him immediately. "David, correct?" He tightened his grip on the mop handle. "Yes, ma'am." "My office. 10 minutes." She didn't break her stride, her heels clicking with sharp authority on the floor as she headed toward the executive wing. David's heart began a slow, heavy beat against his ribs. That was it. No preamble, just a summons. He was sure this was how it ended. He leaned his mop against the wall, dried his hands on his work pants, and tried to quiet the anxious drumming in his chest. She was going to fire him for overstepping. All he could do now was walk toward the inevitable. Riding the elevator to the top floor felt like ascending to another world. The air up here was different, quieter, cooler, filled with the bright, unforgiving light from the panoramic windows. This was a space for power, not for the people who cleaned it. Her assistant gave him a curious look before nodding toward the open office door. David took a deep breath and stepped inside. Vanessa's office was vast, with polished floors and a wall of windows that displayed the city skyline like a masterpiece. She motioned for him to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. He sat, his hands resting on his knees, trying to project a calmness he didn't feel. She took a slow sip of her coffee, then set the cup down. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, her voice even and direct. David blinked, thrown off balance. "An apology," she continued, leaning back in her chair, "and a debt of gratitude. I was unprofessional last night. You could have taken advantage of that. Instead, you helped me. No one else did." The words hung in the air between them. "You don't have to do this," David managed to say. She held up a hand. "My father cleaned office buildings," she said, her gaze momentarily drifting toward the window. "He raised me by himself, the same way you're raising Amara." David's heart jumped at the mention of his daughter's name. "You know about Amara?" "I read the personnel files," Vanessa said, a faint smile touching her lips. "And I pay attention to the people who work hard and act with integrity." "You've been here, 3 years?" "4," David corrected quietly. She nodded. 4 years. Not a single complaint. 4 years of coming in early, staying late, and fixing things before anyone else even knows they're broken. I can't ignore that. I won't. She paused, picking up a pen from her desk. "The facilities coordinator position is opening up next month. It comes with better pay, better hours, and full benefits for you and Amara. It's yours, if you want it." David stared at her, the words taking a moment to sink in. They were so far from the reprimand he'd braced himself for. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she replied, her tone firm but warm. Her expression softened. "And tell Amara she was right. You did meet someone important." The pen clicked softly as she set it down. The meeting was over. David stood, a dizzying mix of relief and disbelief washing over him. As he turned to leave, Vanessa offered him a small, genuine smile, one that belonged not to the CEO, but to someone who understood what it meant to be helped when no one was watching. That evening, David walked into his apartment with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Amara was on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, a half-eaten slice of pizza on the coffee table beside her. "Hey, kiddo," he said, hanging up his coat. She sat up, her eyes wide and perceptive. "You're smiling," she observed, as if documenting a rare phenomenon. something good happened. David chuckled and sat down next to her. He looked at his daughter, at the way her braids fell over her shoulder, at her restless energy. "You know how you told me I should go to that party?" he began. "Yep," she said, her voice full of pride, "because you needed to have some fun." "Well," David said, leaning back, "you were right. I met someone important." "Who?" "Vanessa Moore." Her jaw dropped. "The super serious boss lady?" David laughed. "She's not so serious. And she's not just my boss anymore. She offered me a new job today. Facilities coordinator. More money, better hours, and health insurance for both of us." Amara let out a squeal and threw her arms around his neck, nearly toppling him. "Dad, that's amazing!" She pulled back, her face beaming. "See? I told you so." He held her close, the solid warmth of her hug grounding him more than any promotion ever could. "Yeah, you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you crying?" she asked, tilting her head to study him. He shook his head, smiling as he blinked back the moisture in his eyes. "No, just really, really happy. But it was more than happiness. It was the profound feeling of being seen, not as the man in the background, but as a person who mattered." They spent the rest of the night finishing the pizza, the television forgotten. Outside, the city hummed along, oblivious to the quiet miracle that had unfolded in their small living room. David knew the new job would change their lives in countless practical ways, but what he would carry with him was the simple truth that an act of kindness, offered without any expectation of reward, can find its way back to you. As Amara leaned her head against his shoulder, he thought about how the world, in its own time, has a way of remembering. Some heroes don't wear capes, they wear work uniforms, carry their daughter's drawings in their wallet, and quietly do the right thing when it would be easier to just walk away.